Good afternoon. We will open up the Architectural Board of Review for March 17th, 2025, and we will start with roll call, please.
Thank you. Chair Anderson,
Here.
Vice Chair Whalen,
Here.
Board Member Anderson,
Here.
Board Member Black,
Here.
Board Member Noon,
Here.
Board Member Six,
Here.
Board Member Sovereign.
Here.
We have quorum.
And we will open up public comment. So any member of the public may address the board for up to 2 minutes on any subject within its jurisdiction that is not scheduled on the agenda today.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I'll start with in-person public comment. At this time, I do not have any slips for general public comment, so I will turn my attention to virtual attendance. And at this time, I do not see any hands raised for general public comment. However, we did receive written correspondence from a Miss Diana Diaz, and at that, I will turn it back over to you, Chair Anderson.
Thank you. We will close general public comment and go to the approval of the minutes from the ABR meeting on March 3rd, 2025.
So moved. Oh, do we need to read it first?
I don't think so. I'll second that. Any discussion, questions?
Yes, if I may.
Yes.
On my comments on the Sears project, number... You can read. Yes. One down where we say 18 arches, right there at the bottom of the page. I didn't mean specifically 18 arches. I mean, for example, so I would like to say a row of repeating arches.
Okay, that sounds good to.
That would be appropriate.
Yeah, okay. Any other discussion? All right, let's take a vote.
Okay. Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen,
I will abstain as I couldn't get access to the minutes.
okay. Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Black,
Yes.
Board Member Noon,
Yes.
Board Member Six,
Yes.
Board Member Sovereign.
Abstain. I wasn't here.
Okay. Thank you. We have quorum.
Okay.
I mean, motion passes, excuse me. Wrong expression.
Okay, then let's move on to item C for general business, approval of the minutes of the ABR meeting, consent meeting on February 10th and March 3rd.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I have those both pulled up on the screen, and we'll just scroll through since we're approving them. Those were the February 10th consent minutes, and then we have the March 3rd.
Do I have a motion?
But I'll make a motion, we approve.
Second.
Great. Any discussion? Okay, let's take a vote.
Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen,
Yes?
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Black,
Yes.
Board Member Noon,
Yes.
Board Member Six,
Yes.
Board Member Sovereign.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, do we have any announcements, requests by applicants for continuances and withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Just one staff announcement. That last meeting, staff had made an announcement regarding the special joint ABR Planning Commission meeting scheduled for Thursday, March 20th. That meeting is no longer a joint meeting. It is a Planning Commission only meeting. However, that project will still return to ABR for project design approval in April. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but I have to announce that I won't be here for consent next week.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, do we have any subcommittee reports? Nope. Okay, then let's move on to item 1, miscellaneous item, adaptive reuse ordinance. Staff presentation on draft Title 30 zoning ordinance amendments regarding adaptive reuse. Adaptive reuse is the retrofitting and repurposing of an existing building to create new residential units. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. Planning Commission staff report dated 5/20/24 was available for us to review. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Architectural Board of Review. My name's Dana Falk. I'm a long-range project planner in the Planning Division. I'm here to talk to you about a draft ordinance we're working on for adaptive reuse. We took this to Planning Commission in December of 2024, so I want to give you an update of what we told them, what we heard, what we're working on, and kind of next steps, just to keep you up to speed on it and to get your input, which is what this slide says. So the adaptive reuse ordinance, as mentioned in the introduction, we are looking at codifying some commonly approved zoning modifications to facilitate the conversion of non-residential buildings to residential units. There will be no change to your purview as ABR or the review process you go through. Ultimately, we're hoping that this ordinance would bring more adaptive reuse projects to you. But other than that, no change to what you guys all do so well. The purpose of doing this ordinance is to incentivize the creation of housing by reusing existing non-residential buildings. It's looking to codify commonly approved zoning modifications that are already being done and ultimately reduce the planning process that these projects need to go through. Now, when I say adaptive reuse, I mean something very specific. We're proposing the definition you see on the screen now, that adaptive reuse is the retrofitting and repurposing of an existing building to create new residential units. See also change in use. Change in use is already allowed in the city because of our pyramid zoning. We have a lot of mixed use zones that allow both a commercial and multi-unit residential in the same zone. So a building can already convert from, say, an office into apartments if they want to. That's what change in use is. We're just looking to, again, codify to reduce some process for those very specific types of projects. The ordinance we took to Planning Commission in December had kind of 4 big areas I'm going to go through very, very quickly with you today. Those are applicability, eligibility requirements, the incentives we're offering, as well as some additional requirements these projects would have to meet in order to receive those incentives. Major topic of the discussion and comments we received at Planning Commission had to do with the applicability categories we proposed. These originated in the housing element, which was adopted in December of 2023 and then certified by the state in February of 2024. We took this topic to a joint meeting with City Council and Planning Commission in July of 2024 and received a lot of comments and votes there. So we are proposing that a project, in order to be eligible for the incentives we're proposing, has to meet one of these categories, not all of them. So that's something, if you're in the CBD, you get the incentives. If you're a hotel citywide converting to housing, you get the incentives. If you're converting a historic resource, you get the incentives. And if the project you're proposing will provide half of those units, 50%, deed restricted affordable to either moderate low or very low, you would get the incentives we're proposing. In addition to the applicability categories, you then need to meet all of these eligibility criteria. I won't read through all of them because we don't have the time today, but they're very basic, and there were no comments from Planning Commission on amending or revising any of these. So if you are interested, the staff report that was attached to the agenda today did go through all of them. As I mentioned, eligible adaptive reuse projects will get some zoning development standard relief, which we're calling incentives. The big one is no maximum residential density will apply to that adaptive reuse project that, again, meets one of the applicability categories, as well as all the eligibility criteria. There would be no setback requirements for the conversions. The existing parking and open space, you won't have to do any more parking for that change of use, and you won't have to provide any residential open yard to these projects, something that a commercial building may or may not be able to supply when they're converting over. And the final topic I'm going to go through really quickly today is a couple of the additional requirements that we're proposing need to apply to these projects, and this is something that we did receive some Planning Commission comments on. I'm only going to touch on 2 of those. That's in the middle of the screen, the limits on new floor area and the ground floor on State Street we received comments on. And so we're working on options to take back to Planning Commission as we're drafting this ordinance. The review process for these projects, again, won't change anything that you do here at ABR. You'll still be reviewing any exterior alterations to buildings that come through. There is a slight adjustment to the review process for these projects. They won't have to do the AUD pre-app and concept review, which is currently required for those larger projects. And like I mentioned, this intention of this ordinance is to codify some commonly approved modifications, so therefore they won't have to go through the zoning modifications process, which typically requires staff hearing officer or planning commission to get approval for parking density, open yard, or setback mods. Okay. Touched on these very briefly as we're going through this, but here at a high level are the comments that we received from Planning Commission, and it's what staff has been working on these last few months as we're getting ready to go back to them in May and talk through the expansion of applicability, looking at the requirement for ground floor non-residential on State Street, how additions are allowed, and how it correlates with the incentives and eligibility requirements, as well as coordination with other city requirements. Particularly SWIMP was a big topic of conversation, and so we've been hard at work coordinating with other city staff and divisions on what these requirements may mean for these projects. I do want to note that inclusionary housing was touched upon at Planning Commission. That is being done in a separate staff effort, so it's not part of the ordinance today, but it is getting the attention that it was called for. Just to wrap up on what the next steps are, I mentioned we're going back to Planning Commission. That'll be a discussion item in May, exact date, TBD. We will ultimately need to go back to Planning Commission for ordinance recommendation. Then we go to City Council, City Council, City Council. So there's 5 more public hearings right now scheduled for this ordinance. The only one that has a kind of time frame per se is the one happening in May with Planning Commission, and ultimately the housing element does call for this program to be complete by the end of 2025, so we'll be hard at work. Now the fun part, I do have a question that obviously any comments you have today I am very grateful to hear, but I do have a very specific topic I'd like to hear from you all because you are more experts in this field. One of the requirements that we're proposing for these adaptive reuse projects are those projects on State Street from Montecito, Highway 101, all the way up to Sola. If the project fronts onto State Street in those blocks, we want to require that the ground floor of those buildings that are being converted maintain a non-residential use to activate State Street. When we went to Planning Commission, we proposed that that non-residential use, that space that houses it, be a minimum of 35 feet deep as measured from the building's facade. Planning Commission was somewhat in support of using a minimum depth requirement. They also suggested using a minimum % of ground floor. So I was wondering if you can share some of your experience on what method would you support to regulate that non-residential use, again, State Street, Montecito to Sola, with the intent to activate State Street. With that, I want to say thank you for my very quick presentation. And if you have any questions or comments or thoughts, here's my contact information, and I'd love to hear from you.
Great, thank you so much. Do we need to open public comment on
Yes,
this? Okay,
please.
so then we will open public comment on item 1.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I'll start with in-person public comment. At this time, I do not have any slips for this particular item, and if anyone wishes to make a comment, they may fill one out and bring it to me. However, I see no one in the audience, and we will turn our attention to general public comment from virtual comment, and I see no hands raised there for public comment on this item, and we did not receive any written correspondence for this item, and at that I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Anderson.
Okay, we will close public comment and go to questions from the board. Do we have any questions? Your mic's not on.
For the street frontage input, has there been a consideration to do a combination where there's like a minimum depth or percentage, just like sort of how like setbacks can be handled in some situations?
We have looked at utilizing maybe an either or method, right? Wanting to give the most flexibility to what a project can do. Obviously, we want these projects to succeed, and an empty space doesn't do us any good. So we have been considering alternative methods to regulate, which was one of the reasons I was asking that question specifically. If it is a combination of methods that you would suggest we continue to look into, we will. Ultimately, we were looking at really wanting to activate State Street, and so having the required non-residential space be at the facade was really important to us. Understanding that each building is different. We don't know how big they are. So if a building is on a 25-foot lot and it's 100 feet deep and the entire lot is lot line to lot line building, that space may not be appropriate for a residential or a non-residential use, I'm sorry, for the entire 50% of that building footprint. So that's one of the reasons we were looking more at the minimum depth, knowing that minimum is minimum, not maximum. So if a project does want to keep a non-residential use on the whole ground floor, you exceed the minimums. But right now we're just trying to look at what meets the intent of activating State Street with the barest amount of regulation, but knowing that there may need to be additional options to increase the flexibility.
Thanks.
Chair Anderson, thank you. I read in the depth of, and I don't know which document it was, but it mentioned that bicycle parking should be considered for as larger spaces for e-bikes. And is that going to be pursued? I feel like I'm on a lone campaign trying to get bigger spaces for e-bikes.
It is being talked about. I will say it is not within the scope of the adaptive reuse ordinance itself. I have spoken with transportation planning staff, and they are looking at the bicycle regulation minimum requirements for all projects, which once that change occurs, then adaptive reuse projects would need to follow. At present, the adaptive reuse project reduces parking for vehicle requirements, but doesn't change any requirements for bicycle parking. But those base standards
So
would
that-
need to be amended.
That
and
will be a
that's
different
correct, yeah.
package.
Yes, correct.
And there was also discussion of the new floor area, minimum new floor area for such as circulation and amenities. I can see a very strong argument for a corridor or something even outside the building skin to better exiting but it wasn't mentioned in the draft ordinance. Is that intended to be dealt with in the final ordinance?
It is, and unfortunately, I don't have my ordinance printed out with me to share
Okay.
with you, but it does in this.
So, yeah, so the ordinance, the draft ordinance that we read is outdated and.
We are
is-
working on
okay.
updating it based on the planning commission comments we heard, and we will be going back to them in May
Okay,
on the
thank you.
topics. But we do address, especially for building code minimum requirements for fire life safety, that those additions outside of a building aren't constrained beyond the minimum you need to meet
Correct,
those
yeah.
safety
And
requirements.
that will be included, yes.
Correct.
So it would seem to me that one of the things that would have to happen would be a lot more windows in some of the, very plain.
Potentially, yeah.
But the setbacks those new windows would have to behave the setbacks for adjacent buildings, correct?
Correct, yeah. So we're not changing any of those kind of privacy or screening requirements that exist presently. There is a limitation when you're converting within the setback to a residential unit that is in a code section that I can't recall the number off the top of my head. And so by allowing that existing structure to be reutilized as residential, that kind of very small caveat of not having a unit in the setback would not apply to eligible adaptive reuse projects, but any window or other perforations in the exterior envelope that would need to go and would still have to meet all the other development standards.
Okay, so one scenario that I was thinking, so we get this very plain, beautifully, has a building that has beautiful opportunity for the adaptive reuse, and we have blank walls, and there has to be quite a few rows and columns of new windows. And I can see the ABR being very uncomfortable with, just the idea of popping all these windows in. Could the ABR be allowed to suggest a new skin or other features outside of the exact envelope of the building to soften this what could be a unfortunate repetition of windows.
I will say I am not knowledgeable enough on the ABR guidelines and purview to be able to answer that.
Well, it's just a
So I will have to
simple,
look into it and get back to you.
simple matter of aesthetics. I mean, sometimes we'd have, I could see a problem having a blank wall with, the windows all popped in it without any relief or, differentiation between the base, the middle, and the top, blah, blah, blah. So I think it's just a question to be considered, that the details are important, and if we're faced with our hands tied with, all these new windows or elements without any opportunity to suggest methods to organize them or, make them into an aesthetic composition, I think that would be something to look at.
I will
Thank
say,
you.
right, as part of the ordinance, we're not looking to change any of the role you currently have on
Mm-hmm.
projects, so I believe you're already able to have those kinds of comments, and if you are, then you still can, definitely.
Well, I can see it being a pinch, because if we can't add any square footage to the outside, and, for instance, a furring of a wall to have at least these windows punch, deeper into this blank wall, maybe just at the, just at the ground floor or whatever, just so.
Okay, no, definitely a good point. I'll look into it.
I feel there's a pinch there that we would like to clear up before, would like to be advised on.
Okay, thank you. I will definitely look into it and get back to you.
They could call that an architectural feature.
Chair Anderson? Yes, thank you, Ms. Falk. I only wish that you would have been by my side with your presentation as I read the ordinance twice and wondered, why am I looking for? What am I looking for here? And so now I realize that you're here for information and a reaction, and you've answered my question about what elements are pertinent to the ABR, such as changes to the exterior, windows, et cetera. Is there anything else in this ordinance that might bring it to the ABR? It's really just architectural changes on the exterior, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. That, it might be more clearly stated in the
Okay.
document that that's what it's all about. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely, thank you.
Any other
Yeah, I
questions?
have
or
a
thoughts?
follow-up. On this ground floor commercial space on State Street, I don't have an opinion on how to define the size, but it would seem to me important, and I don't know how you regulate this or what it goes, but some of these spaces will need a lot of service. And how, and if you're going to have them all up front without any requirement or opportunity to service from the back, I can see that choking State Street, so that might be a consideration.
Do want to note there's no maximum, right? So those spaces could exceed the whole width. We're just trying to focus that the State Street facades are activated and what's the minimum depth of that activated space. But if 60 feet works better, 100 feet, whatever the building allows, and again, for access, definitely makes sense.
Well, would you require some sort of access, if the majority of the developers that take this opportunity do just a minimum depth along State Street, I see that the service issue being multiplied and be of an issue.
Yeah, I had a question. So for context, is this ordinance intended to address activating State Street, or is it a broader thing than that? Or
Definitely broader. We're looking at citywide in some context to try and convert existing non-residential buildings to housing. Because there are quite a few efforts ongoing in the city focused on State Street and getting more housing, downtown is definitely something we're all interested in doing. but wanting to make sure that State Street continues to stay, as vibrant and active as we can make it. That requirement for the ground floor non-residential is only required on that stretch of State Street, but the adaptive reuse ordinance as a whole, not exclusive of that ground floor non-residential requirement, would be citywide with the focus of housing.
Yeah, some of these adaptive reuse I know from experience in the field and on projects like this can be so expensive, both in time to kind of work with figure out the existing, and money to get all the building systems to support the, converting to housing is not a simple feat. And from a use that's not currently set up for that. I'm curious, as a more general question, if you have a sense why, we've seen, in my time on the board, we've seen, for instance, with the La Cumbre Plaza projects, a lot of the volume of the housing coming through has gone elsewhere rather than onto State Street or in the nearby area in the urban core. If you have a sense, why developers might be pursuing projects elsewhere, I guess, as opposed to, where we're now, I guess, trying to put adaptive reuse projects.
I wish I had a better answer for you than I don't know, because I don't know. Unfortunately, we are, from the staff perspective, trying to figure out ways that we can facilitate those conversions in places where they're not already occurring. You guys recently saw the 3055 De La Vina project as a concept review, right? That's an adaptive reuse of an existing hotel that the Housing Authority is transitioning over to residential. There's a couple other ones that are kind of in the works that we've been seeing, and I will say that from staff's perspective, there are more and more adaptive reuse projects, and so we're trying to figure out, we're already building momentum that way. What else can we do to continue to get that momentum going so we can get more housing units? Why they're not occurring at the rate we want, we're still trying to figure out, but we're doing all the little tweaks that we can incrementally to make it happen.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying why there's not more adaptive reuse happening. I'm kind of questioning if this ordinance is intended to attempt to provide a more housed State Street, then, and we're seeing, we just saw 450 units for the Sears site, why developers are targeting viable sites as identified in the AUD, in areas that are not in the urban core, and whether you have a sense as to, because there are sites downtown that can be developed. We saw one that's going to be 4 stories of storage units. So I'm just curious why, maybe if you have a sense of that, why we're not seeing housing being proposed in the urban core.
Unfortunately, the answer is still I don't know. That's not my background. I've never done development, so I can't really tell you. I would imagine it's because things aren't penciling in the pro formas. But beyond that, that's kind of my best guess, and it's not a very good guess to begin with, but that's kind of what we are hearing. Because, we are seeing very large housing projects coming in different areas of the city, or projects that we would really love to see housing that maybe aren't housing. And so this is just one of those tools in our tool chest to try and make housing a little bit more viable financially, so that maybe we can see more housing being proposed than any other use that is available in our mixed use zones.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think any incentive you can give to developers or designers and able to make it move faster is always appreciated. In consideration of the ground floor occupiable space, I kind of tend to lean towards what Board Member Soffren said, like a 35 feet minimum or percentage, whatever's, I don't know, however it's worded, whatever's minimum, but something else to consider besides access for utilities or service is exiting. So there is a code, of square footage that you can't go over without 2 exits, and then how is that working out if you're only exiting one side? So just something to think about.
If I could, I wanted to reiterate what Board Member Six was saying. It seems like when you add that ground floor separate use that could really congest State Street, potentially. I know you're not asking for our input on that specifically, but I think that should be something you guys should really study.
Great. Any additional comments or questions? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, we will move on to item 2. This is a new item for concept review at 306 Ladera Street. The 11,226 square foot lot is developed with an 854 square foot single-family residence, 455 square foot garage, and 310 square foot shed. The proposed project consists of the demolition of the existing garage and shed and constructing 5 new units for a total of 6 units using the city's average unit size density incentive program. The existing 854 square foot residence, Building 1, will remain. Proposed Building 2 is a 2-story duplex with a 658 square foot 3-car garage and a new trash enclosure. Building 3 is a 2-story single-family residence, and Building 4 is a 2-story duplex. The project also includes a new driveway, new walkways, and new parking with a 658 square foot garage and new 57 square foot trash enclosure and new landscaping. Project requires staff hearing officer approval of an open yard modification for relief from open yard standards and a parking modification to provide 5 parking spaces instead of the required 6. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. Staff hearing officer requests comments for aesthetic supportability for the open yard and parking modifications. Project will require compliance with project compatibility findings and urban design guidelines. Okay, anything from staff?
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. Our case planner, Kelly Brodison, is here if there's any questions, but I think you covered it in the project description and just in your comments, make sure to include your support of the open yard and parking modifications from the ABR's aesthetic perspective. Thank you.
Awesome.
And Kelly's here for any questions.
Okay. Well, welcome. Please introduce yourself and walk us through your project.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. My name is Liz Hughes, representing Tom Oxner Architect and the owner, David Said. The project consists of 5 new units, a total of 6 units under the AUD program. And I'm going to zoom ahead to the existing site photos. On the bottom right corner here, you can see our project site. At the street, there are 3 existing buildings, a single-story, 2-bedroom unit, and then a shed and garage building. So some older buildings kind of in the back. And then the majority of the lot is just open with a few pine trees, so kind of just a dirt area here in the back, which are the bottom 3 photos. Along the side, you can see the existing driveway, and then those garage structures again here as well. The surrounding neighborhood is made up primarily of 2-story low-rise apartment buildings. There are a few single-family type residences in the area, but most of them have about 3 buildings on these long and narrow sites. Our site as well is about 50 feet wide and 200 or so feet long here. And let's see, I'm going to kind of zoom forward. So this is the existing survey showing those 3 buildings at the front and then the neighboring buildings to the side, which have 3 residential units. Our proposed project, the way that we originally approached the design was to look at it in 2 ways. One was to create kind of a single building made up of multiple units, so a 6-unit single building. And then the second way was to try and break it up more to allow for space between the units and give it kind of more of a garden apartment type feel. We do a lot of these duplex type units, which seem to work really well with for natural lighting, and then also allowing for the occupants to have some visual access to the common open yard. The one challenge of this site was maintaining that existing building at the front of the lot. It's kind of taking up quite a bit of space. You can see with the parking and that unit, it takes up about half of the lot. So to try and place the rest of the units on the rest of the lot is where we ended up requesting the open yard modification. So this front unit actually has, it's currently fenced in from the street. You can't really see much of it. Because of that, we are having to remove a lot of the existing landscaping and the fencing because of the visibility requirements for the driveway. We also talked to the fire department about the driveway width, and so that needed to be increased as part of this project as well. So we have an 18-foot driveway along the side of that unit. Then there is a parking court made up of permeable pavers, which consists of 2 uncovered parking spaces and 3 garage spaces. The last parking stall, which we originally had, we converted to bike parking because this project is conceived primarily as providing student housing for City College. So we wanted to prioritize the bike parking over additional car parking spaces. Then at the back of the site is where our new development is, and we have 2 duplex buildings and then 1 single building, all 2 stories. This is that bike parking enclosure here, and then the floor plans. On the second floor, we tried to step back the footprint a little bit on the upper level to create some variation in the facade. And then the idea of this style of the architecture is kind of a cottage style, similar to a lot of the other residential projects in the neighborhood with a horizontal siding. And then here are our elevations of those units. Today we were primarily here to try and get comments about the proposed modifications to, and then I do want to talk a little bit more before I move on about this open yard. So originally this was conceived as kind of a pedestrian court where people would walk through this open yard to their units, but because of the requirements to not have any access pathways going through the open yard, we moved the access to the other side of the units and then maintained this area for the residences. The idea is that by providing a larger common open yard, and the dimension is 20 feet by 41 feet 10 inches, so it's 870 square feet total, that kind of meets the intent of providing the alternative common open yard while not, providing exactly the square footage of the total. And then that area that's also in front of the existing unit would be provided for that unit as well. So the other units that we're proposing as open yard are the areas in the setback area and then landscaped areas in between the units, so that we thought that it was nicer to walk through these landscaped areas than to kind of walk in a long linear fashion, as you see quite often along a driveway area. And so that's what we were trying to accomplish with the design here. I'm gonna go back to our material board here. And then these are just the materials that we're proposing as part of this project. Shingle style roof, horizontal siding, some stained wood, and then white trim and exposed rafters. I think that concludes our presentation.
Okay, thank you. We will open up public comment for item 2.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I'll start with in-person public comment. At this time, I do not have any slips for this particular item. However, if anyone wishes to make a comment, they may fill one out and bring it to me. I see no one in the audience moving to do so, so we will turn our attention to virtual comment. And at this time, I do have a hand raised from Sophie, so I will unmute, and Sophie, you will have 2 minutes to speak. Sophie, you may proceed.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So I had just two concerns looking at it. You kind of addressed one of them, which was regards to the parking, because this area is notoriously, awful for parking, and we always have people, and that's been an issue. I'm not sure if you can elaborate on that anymore. With we're seeing like 10 new residents, and I'm not sure if there's anything else you can say for that.
We can address that after your 2 minutes.
Okay, sorry. Sorry. Okay, and then the other thing was we were saying the trash area for this building. It's like right up next to where the other residents' main living are, and so they're often like rummaged through. Is it going to be any way like locked up or prevented from like the constant homeless people coming in? Because that's just going to be a scent where it's now pressed up against those units at 310 Ladera. Those were like my main two things.
Okay, thank you.
I don't need it.
Okay, thank you very much. We will move on. I do not see any additional hands raised for a virtual public comment, and we did not receive any written correspondence for this particular item, so at that I will turn it back over to you, Chair Anderson.
Thank you. We will close public comment, and would the applicant like to walk us through where your trash enclosure is and any specifications on that?
Sure. The trash enclosure is on the side of the garage here, next to, oops, let me try and zoom in on that a little bit. So the trash enclosure is on the side, next to the pathway to the units, and the bike parking. So it kind of provides a good access along that pathway, for the residents of the building. Trash enclosures are typically located kind of towards the side, so.
Is it locked or are there doors on it?
There are doors on it, so.
Is it covered?
It is covered. Yeah, it's part of the building. It's enclosed. So I would think that should provide some protection.
And then if you could go to the survey, I think you had it on the survey next to where, or show us where it is on the site possibly, potentially.
So I think kind of in this location here
Okay.
is where the trash would be.
Okay. And I'm not sure if there's anything to address regarding the parking, but there's 5 spaces and there's bike parking provided.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's move to questions from the board. Board Member 6, would you like to start?
Thank you, Chair Henderson. The rear of the property backs up to the parking lot for apartments down the road, right?
I'm gonna take a look at that aerial photo. I'm not sure it's on there, though. I guess I can't really see that. I'm not sure what's behind there.
My exploration says it is. That's my only question.
Vice Chair Whalen?
Yes, 2 small questions. Thank you, Chair Anderson. The first is, I didn't see any interior elevations of buildings between 2, 3, and 4. I assume they're in character with no big deal on that. And then could you go to the plan showing the bike shed? Just a quick clarification. The box inside the shed is the rack, so there is unused 3 feet on either side of it?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And we had to do that per the bike parking
Very good.
standards.
Okay, and then last question, you're asking for an open yard reduction. What percentage of area or of a reduction are you asking for?
So the common open yard that we're providing currently, let me go to that diagram. Here, I'm gonna zoom in on this diagram here. Oops. So this is the diagram of the common open yard, and this is that, the shared public area, and that's about 870 square feet, which is 8% of the lot area. We're not allowed to count the area, even though it meets the dimensional requirements between the buildings. So this pathway in the landscaped area that's between the buildings, we can't count because it's providing access. So the other areas that we're this area in the setback is what we were saying would make up the rest of the square footage requirement. But in reality, we have a lot more landscaped area, including the area behind the existing building and the area in front of the building. But we're just kind of looking primarily at this one large space.
So I got a little confused there. So the gray area can't be counted, but you're asking that that be appreciated, if I'm looking for a word.
Exactly.
As open yard in lieu of this reduction.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Board Member Black?
I guess the only thing that came to mind was logistically, how does one access the trash, for pickup? Since you've got it set way back from the street, well, how does Marburg get the trash? Does it all have to be smaller bins that have to be rolled out to the street? How does
They
that work?
are smaller bins, and I guess either they would pull into the drive court and wheel the bins out into the drive court, or the bins would be wheeled out to the street front. I'm not really sure what the protocol is in this area.
Yeah.
If the residents have to put it out, or how it works with the trash company.
Okay, that was my only question, thanks.
Board Member Noon?
No questions.
Board Member Soffren?
What, just curious, I missed it, like, why does the driveway have to be 18 feet wide?
It's fire department access for, based on the number of units.
Okay, and then, is there any, like, mechanical equipment area? Like, is there a plan for air conditioning, compressors, and all?
We are showing the condensers on the plans. They're in the planter areas, so you can see a few of them on this plan here.
Okay, thanks.
Board Member Anderson?
What are with the ground floor units, what are they looking out at?
The ground floor units, these ones, these three would be looking out at the common open space. And then the other ones would just be looking out at the they wouldn't really be looking out at anything at all, other than the landscaping in front of the building.
Do you mind flipping to the floor plan? Thanks. There you go, yeah. So if you zoom out a little bit, yeah, it looks like, so you've got windows looking out towards the property line on Plan North. What is in the adjacent property? It's the back of a single-family lot, or?
It's other units, and there's a driveway along that side, I believe. Let me see, what's on this survey? The same owner actually owns both of these lots. So there's a driveway between this property and the neighboring property, and then there's a fence in between.
I see. Okay, and then I'm sure you said this already, but why was the, what drove citing the new building so far deep into the lot?
It was primarily to retain the existing two-bedroom unit in the front. That was part of one of the owner's goals, to maintain this existing building. And that created a lot of challenges to do that. And then in between that building and the proposed buildings, we decided to create this drive court, which would kind of reduce that long driveway that you see in a lot of these linear lots, and to kind of create more of like a courtyard feel in between that existing building and then the proposed buildings. I think another reason, was as an effort to be green, to maintain this existing building that's already functional and not, tear it down and send it to a landfill, but then also, try to provide as much housing as possible under the AUD program.
Okay.
I had a couple follow-up questions. The fence along that north, or plan north on your property line, is that staying or is it new?
I think that one is staying. There's a portion of fence along the southerly, southeasterly property line that's, I guess, needing to be repaired or removed. I think we had called that out on our site plan, which areas are being retained under this. Let me go back to that. Okay, so, oops. We did call out which portions of the fences. So the existing wood fence, and then we'd be adding a gate in between here to go into the area with the units. And then on the other side, we're proposing a new fence between this property because there was a little bit of, I think the fence was kind of doing something or partially damaged along that side. So there's a portion of new and a portion of existing.
And then was there any consideration to add another gate closer to the street for people to get in?
There is a gate
There is a
closer
gate.
to, or there, we were showing it, it might be on the floor plans,
Okay.
actually. I thought we had one, but maybe we didn't add one.
It was just a thought.
Oh, yeah, actually, here it is. It's included as part of the fence into the front
okay.
unit, so it's a lot further forward.
Got it.
But I do want to add another fence to kind of block off this front yard from the pathway and
Okay.
create a little bit more privacy for the front unit.
Okay. And then can you go to the existing street elevation or just a photo of it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it's actually really hard to see anything of what's going on here.
And that tree staying?
No, actually, the tree's gonna have to be removed as part of the parkway improvements here because there isn't an existing parkway. And so this tree is actually kind of in an interesting location here. If we go to the demolition plan. So you can see how the tree is located close to the property, basically on the landscaped area of the front yard. But because of the way that the parkway needs to be rearranged with the 4-foot parkway along the street side, we're gonna have to remove that tree and then plant a new street tree
Okay.
along the street frontage.
Okay, those are my only questions for now. Follow-up?
One follow-up, could you go to your diagram showing the, what are those called? The view access for exiting from the driveway?
Oh, sure.
I'm sure there's a formal name for it. Yes, there's one at the upper side. Well, can you explain
So
what that
that's-
one's about?
Yeah, that's the driveway for the adjacent parcel.
Driveway for the adjacent.
Yeah.
All right, that confirms. Thank you.
Can I ask one thing? Just one quick question. So we sort of blew through those elevations that you showed earlier. Can you just sort of briefly talk about architectural style and the intentions that you had relative to neighborhood compatibility and, that sort of thing? Just
Yeah, we wanted to keep the architectural style very simple, kind of a little cottage style, provide a little bit of massing variation along the second floor so that it didn't feel so boxy, and to kind of keep the roof profile as low as possible. So we're under about 23 feet here. So we have 8-foot plate heights on each level. And then to just, part of this, as we develop the design, is going to be to look more at the detailing of the eaves, and we're planning on having exposed rafter tails and a little bit more detail with the architectural style as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Chair Anderson, I think my comment is better dealt with as a question. Beautiful explanation of the way to access the units from the north, but it seems that there would be a lot of advantage to having it accessed from the south. And I'm wondering if it's an absolutely hard and fast rule that you can't have the circulation through the open area. Is that it seems to me that circulation would enliven that open area. And if you flip the garages so the trash is down south, you'd have an immediate problem solved with the trash pickup. Seems that you would be passing one unit rather than 2 units as you pass by to get to the units. Let's be real, people walk down driveways to access their units or park their bicycles and whatever all the time, especially if it's an 18-foot wide. It just seems there's a lot of, you're absolutely down to no planting along a lot of that northern path. It's so skinny and tight. It just seems to me that it would be worth, consideration of accessing it from the south rather than from the north. And I guess my question is the rules of the open yard absolutely disallow circulation through that open yard?
Yes, Chair Anderson and Board Member 6, the open yard can't be used for access to other units. It has to be open, usable, common open yard area. So it doesn't count if it's used as walkways and paths to get to the entrances of the other units.
Okay, that answers my question.
Okay, any other questions before we go to comments? Okay, so let's make comments regarding regarding your supportability for the open yard and parking modifications, as well as just normal concept review comments. So Board Member 6, do you want to start?
Yeah, I don't have any problem with the 2 modifications. I think the common yard is beautifully laid out and is adjacent to all the units direct. The parking is part of the nature of more units in the city, that parking is subservient, parking numbers are subservient to number of units, so I would support that. And the only other minor comment, if you look on the top floor, it would seem to me that the bedrooms adjacent to the north and south property lines and the east property line, the major windows should be oriented east and west So they look out on that rear parking lot and not to the neighbors' privacy issues with the neighbors.
Vice Chair Whalen?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I too think that it does, I can support the open yard and parking modifications as proposed. I think it is an efficient use of parcel. I support the use of breaking it up into smaller buildings, 3 of them rather than one large one. I feel that it is in character with the neighborhood architectural character, the size, bulk, and scale. Although I might suggest as we get tighter into a design that the trim on the windows be heftier and the elements of a craftsman bungalow be brought out. Perhaps the width of the siding be larger on the bottom, smaller on the second floor. Just some of those typical characteristics to bring that idea out. You're proposing the removal of 13 mature trees. You're only replacing 5. I would like to see more trees on a final plan. You'll flesh out a landscape plan further on. The bike storage and circulation, I appreciate being separate from the vehicular, although I do think member 6 has prosed an elegant alternative, having the trash and perhaps the bikes down there. I would strongly suggest a different bike rack. Those are really terrible. They're sort of wheel crunchers, but I'm getting too far into the details. The trash enclosure and location, I do support those comments that it does seem awkward. And if the bikes are going to use that pedestrian circulation, seems to me you might need a curb cut out there where it exits, but the neighborhood, the adjacent parcel might make up for that. And yes, seriously consider the location of the trash bins in regard to the trash truck pickup. Thank you.
Okay, Board Member Black?
Yeah, I agree with those comments, including the modifications. I think the only thing that I would be concerned with is having that trash enclosure be, since you're going to have all your pedestrian activity right past the trash, we just want to make sure that it's not only enclosed but sealed, and so you're not having to get garbage smells and sights and what have you, because everybody's going to be walking right by it to get to their units. But so I think just rather than just an enclosure with an arbor over the top, I just want to make sure that it does the job.
Mm-hmm.
If you understand what I mean. Yeah. That's all. Thanks.
Board Member Noon?
I agree also with the previous comments and would support the modifications. I would also encourage you, if possible, to pursue that flipping the access, if that's something that you can still do and still maintain, an open yard that you need. I think that is a much more livable use and navigating the site. So I would agree with that as well.
Board Member Sofrin?
Same.
Board Member Anderson?
Yeah, I think that just in terms of practical comments, the site circulation, the way it's being accessed, and also even the way the car is coming in and then turning to park at the parking lot is kind of inefficient, and it's causing the actual site plan to maybe lose a little bit of what it could have and is starting to have now in this idea of a courtyard and the arrangement of these kind of more compact dwelling units that share a common space. And I think the landscape will or could play a really nice role in that in terms of habitability and a civilized kind of sense of cohabiting a common site. So I think if the site circulation were a little bit more dialed in we could get a little bit nicer experience of the common space. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, I also support the open yard and parking modifications. I would consider looking and studying the bike parking and the trash enclosure maybe become one if you have enough space. I don't know. Maybe that's better access for everyone. I actually think a pedestrian access and a vehicular access is important for a large, for multi-units. But I think the mass bulk and scale is in compliance with the neighborhood and its efficient layout on the site. And I think breaking it up into 3 buildings is also appropriate. So I think when you come back, it would be helpful to look at the neighbors and like understanding the privacy from windows, and the adjacencies. I think it's starting to make sense on here, but just the labeling your neighbors and the adjacencies next to your property, the uses. Any other comments?
I'm going to be, can we take a look at the open yard a minute? If one, yeah, I think of the green diagram, I guess. If one had the pedestrian path go down the south and then go directly to the left-hand side of the open area and then go high, no, the other way, yeah, that way, and then go across, no, just go across in front of building 2.
Well,
Yeah, like that. How much more modification is suffered? You would have to ask. I
yeah,
just don't
guess we
believe. I
wouldn't
just
have
don't believe.
any compliant open yard at that point, because the common open yard needs to be 20 feet wide, and this is the 20-foot dimension. So anything coming across this area would reduce it under 20 feet.
It just doesn't
But
seem.
that is how we designed it originally, because we felt like you do, that it does activate this area to have the circulation passing through, and it kind of provides an area for the building occupants to interact with each other in a more natural way. But
Could you ask, or would staff entertain the possibility of that configuration and having the modifications include that?
So either way, they would need a modification, and it's the
Correct.
same thing. So it's right. So it's either they meet it or they don't, and if they don't, either way.
In reality, I think people will probably walk through there anyways, even though it doesn't
Yeah.
count on the, in the overall open space, but it's up to the applicant if they want to try to push for a mod for even less open yard.
Would we be creating then more precedents for people to evade the open yard? I mean,
Well, that's what we're here for, to make exceptions and to find, rather than just the paper diagram rules, we are the board of subjective thinkers,
but I think we are
interpreters.
offering an exception by allowing them to not meet the requirement minimum yard.
Okay, well, all right, I understand, and I would, when the motion is made, I would suggest that at least one board member would be in support of having an alternate south pedestrian path affecting the open yard.
Okay. All right. Well, who would like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Great.
Make a motion to say that we find the project as proposed to be amenable. We support the parking modification and the open yard modification request, we do ask that you further evaluate the, let's start off with the trash enclosure location, see if that can be, if the building one could be flipped, so that would be in Plan South. See the bike storage space, we understand that you have chosen a bike rack system that's per code, so, maybe there could be some evaluation there, I don't know. Add a gate, I believe, at the pedestrian path out of the street, so there's that. Explore the pathway that's on the Plan North running back and see if you could add a path additionally to the south, Plan South, and maybe consider an alternative option to propose, since we are already talking about making a modification to the open yard. Okay. To further develop a more comprehensive landscape plan, and to, I think there was, privacy, to do a study to confirm that the windows on the Plan North, Plan South, and the second story provide adequate privacy from neighbors, adjacent neighbors.
Board Member Sofrin and Chair Anderson, if you can please just start the motion to say continue indefinitely to the staff hearing officer with those comments. You don't need to repeat them, but if
So,
you would accept
gotcha.
that.
So, and the motion is to continue indefinitely
To the staff hearing
to
officer.
the staff hearing officer.
Thank you.
I'll second that with I'm not sure which comment it was, but regarding looking at an alternate path on the south, that the board would still support the open yard modification if that were to happen. And then regarding the gate comment at the front, there is a gate there. So maybe relocating it outside the visibility triangle. Is that good with the motion maker?
Yes.
Okay, any additional discussion? All right, let's take,
So, Chair Anderson, so I'm hearing that you would like this, you don't need to see this project again before it goes to staff hearing officer.
Correct.
And you would be supportive of a aesthetically and site design, that it would be a better design if the pathway to the rear units was on the south side of the property, further reducing the open yard. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can I, never mind, I'm gonna stop.
We're good.
okay, let's take a vote.
Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Black,
Yes.
Board Member Noon,
Yes?
Board Member Six,
Yes.
Board Member Sovereign.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
See you again. Okay, can we take a 2-minute recess? Thank you. reopen our ABR meeting for today and move on to item 3. This is a continued item for concept review. Okay. This project is 1611 Castillo Street. It's a proposal for 5 new residential units under the AUD incentive program with, am I on the right one? Yeah. Okay. With 5 automobile parking spaces, 4 spaces provided in covered carports, and 1 uncovered accessible space, and 5 bicycle parking spaces. The existing development includes a 3-unit apartment building with 3 covered parking spaces and is proposed to remain. Building permits ready to issue for site improvements, including a new driveway, parking area, trash room, landscaping, and for 2 new detached 1-story special ADUs. ABR approval of an alternative open yard design is required. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. Project will require compliance with the project compatibility findings, urban design guidelines, and the project was last reviewed on September 3rd, 2024 for concept review. Anything from staff?
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. I would like to pull up the previous minutes from the September 3rd hearing, and I can read those before the applicant's presentation, and I have some comments on, or just some general staff comments as well. So from the September 3rd hearing, when it was here for its first concept review, the motion was to continue indefinitely to full board with the following comments. 1, the board finds the basic mass, bulk, and scale of the overall project is compatible, interesting, and acceptable. 2, the applicant shall find every means to rearrange the parking layout to minimize the extent of the motor court. 3, the board supports the modification of the open yard being served in a common area given the size and quality of the open yards available. 4, the board finds the architecture in general, including the materials and general expression of the forms, is not compatible with the neighborhood. 5, the views of the project from Arriaga to reflect more of the qualities that reflect the history of Santa Barbara. And 6, the board supports the massing of Unit F and its relationship to the street. And then just to give an update on where the application is at in the process, it is still deemed incomplete. There are outstanding comments from zoning and transportation, and also an arborist report that's required to complete environmental review before we can deem the application complete. As currently designed, there are no modifications that are required or separate land use approvals. However, they do still require that alternative open yard design, which ABR is the decision maker for, and the applicant can show you their open yard plan. And just so, since it is here for a second concept review, that's because the application is still incomplete, and no final appealable action will be taken today. And I would like to clarify that concept reviews do not count towards the 5 public hearing maximum for housing development projects, which is set forth in the Permit Streamlining Act. Once the application is deemed complete and scheduled for project design approval, that's when the hearing clock starts for the 5 maximum public hearings for housing development projects. And that concludes my staff comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, welcome back. If you guys could introduce yourselves and walk us through the updates in your presentation, you'll have 15 minutes.
Sure, thank you, Chair Anderson and board members. We have taken a different look at the overall style of the buildings. As you will note, we're just going to revisit the previous design. We were carrying forward with the hipped roof design to pay an ode to the existing 3-unit building that's there. We got a little bit pushback of the materiality, the vertical siding versus horizontal, the cement board panels and a rain screen assembly versus stucco. And so we listened to that very closely, and I think you'll see we've answered those questions quite completely. Again, no building over 2 stories. Even in the city's review of one of the front 2 units that you'll see on the upper right, there are 2-story units. The one on the right has a basement level below, which houses our parking space and bike room. As required per code, the city is still adamant that that constitutes a 3rd story, even though we don't believe that's true. We have redesigned the project so as to not count that 3rd story, and I'll explain that. So instead of a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath unit with the 2 bedrooms and 1 bath being upstairs, we now have a mezzanine for a sleeping loft, if you will. with a one-bedroom unit. So the cost to the client is a loss of a bedroom and a bathroom, but we still comply with basic zoning code. And as the board will remember, they didn't have a problem with the mass book and scale. They found that that two-story unit was completely acceptable per front yard setback guidelines. As we understand, and you probably do too, front yard setbacks or any setbacks are privy to the grade established at that setback. So even though we believe that the city is in error, we have redesigned it such that we don't need that to be a third story any longer. So let's go to the new set of drawings. And so what we did is we looked around the neighborhood. One of the close to historic properties within a few blocks is a small courtyard of little flat roof bungalows. In the neighborhood, if you go up and down the streets in the neighborhood, you'll see plenty of flat roof buildings. And so what we did was we took the highest roof of the previous design and only relegated it to the one bedroom on the upper level that you'll see the left side of each building there facing the street. And we subsequently stepped down each parapet below that. So now instead of one large massing with a hip roof on top, we're back to 3 different heights, addressing the neighborhood in a slightly minimized way. And if you know anything about the neighboring materials, this is the previous design again. We can compare that with the current. So what we've done is we've gone to plain stucco facades, no more rain screen, less efficient, but nonetheless more appropriate for the neighborhood. Smooth stucco finish is the light gray. The dark gray is what is a board and batten metal siding. So it's not true plywood and wood battens, but a more fire resistive metal appropriation of that same look. So we're matching the look of other buildings in the neighborhood by using those 2 materials. So smooth troweled stucco and board and batten looking metal. And we're going for a metal that's roughly what we see here in the renderings, a more gunmetal gray with a very light gray, almost white Santa Barbara smooth trowel stucco. So that's the gist of the massing changes and design changes. All flat roofs, all very very normal, very found throughout the neighborhood. The comment previously that we were trying to address with the parking. So the current status is those 2 previous permits have been pulled and approved. And so that's why we could not change the maneuverability space in the driveway area. So as much as we'd like to have a planter in the middle of the driveway, the existing building carport spaces prevent us from having a workable maneuverability plan down there. So we couldn't address that one as per the existing permits that were, again, like I said, approved and pulled. So the other comments, you did like the massing. You noted that the view down Arriaga was a little bit more in keeping with the Santa Barbara look and feel. I assume that's because they're stepping down quite a large grade as we go from front to back of the lot. But you can see we did a lot to try to break down the building and not make it look like a single building, but clearly a collection of smaller buildings. So the open yard that we're still asking for, if we go to our open yard diagram with the green and the red spaces, so we're not asking for a reduction in the 15% of the open yard. We're strictly looking at, it's right up front, right with the other site plan. Yeah, so here's what we're saying. So we're not asking for a reduction in the amount of 15%. We're just asking for a couple of the spaces be allowed with, be falling outside of the minimum 10-foot dimension in one orientation of that space. So if you notice numbers 4 and 3 in the lower right-hand corner, that unit entry is for one unit and one unit only. That is not a common space. No one else will be walking into that space. So we are asking that the board would acknowledge that 3 and 4 are usable toward the open space, since it, again, is just, we're not counting the stair and the walkway to the unit. We're just asking for those small spaces. Again, the one on the right is just slightly under the 10-foot. Area number 5 would be a fenced-in open yard for the unit F there along the street. And again, just slightly under 10 feet in one direction. We're asking that you just grant us a few of these spaces to make up the difference to get to the 15%. If you were to take all of the red spaces that you see, we would be 500 square feet over the open yard requirement. So the big one being 2A along the back of the property, that is the backyard of the approved ADUs, and also along the Mission Creek side of the Unit J, which is our ADA unit at the bottom of the hill. So we don't need all of these spaces, we just need a couple of them to get to the minimum 25, 22. And so that's really what we're asking for here. And we have the owner of the property here available if there are any questions that you'd like to ask him. But we've done our best to make a responsible overall site development, improving the current driveway, unsupported, unretained earth, to fully retained, completely permeable parking area. And we're essentially giving the city 7 new units on this parcel. So in addition to the 3 unit building there, we're adding a total of 7 units.
Okay, thank you. We will open up public comment for item 3.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I'll start with in-person public comment. At this time, I do have a slip for a comment, and this is from Mr. Rick Closen. If you could please come up to the podium, make sure you turn on your mic. You will have 2 minutes to speak.
Okay, good. I get to be first. You received my written comments. I don't like this project. I'm not an architect. I don't know the dynamics, the mechanics of the site and how difficult it is to build there. I'm a pedestrian. I look at the elevations. I look at the layout. It's but ugly, number one. That's a technical term. I think that when an applicant comes for concept review and then apparently disregards all of your concerns about neighborhood compatibility, that is what I call faithless compliance. I think that the applicant architect has chosen to cherry pick architectural styles within a broad circle around the property, and then chosen the ones that meet his goals. So instead of a hipped roof that mimics or is a remembrance of the existing building that is going to stay, we get the flat top buildings. I couldn't believe my eyes. Before the meeting, I went down and I walked the neighborhood again. Flat top, parapeted rooftops are not going to be compatible. This is a portal from the freeway to our city. It was not a good look to be complaining about or whining about the city making me do this and making me do that. And I noted this is a bad comparison with the previous project, where it seemed like that applicant made a lot of effort to meet neighborhood compatibility, plate heights is one of those things that I noticed the difference here and there. My time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will continue with comments. We're going to turn, I have no further slips for this. If anyone else wishes to make a comment, they may fill one out and bring it to me. We will now turn our attention to virtual attendance, if anyone has a comment there. And at this time, I see no hands raised for virtual comment. And we did receive lots of letters in response to this project. One from Mary Louise Days, Brian Miller, Sheila Lodge, Rick Closen, Leslie Collas, and Christine Newhouser. And at that, I will turn it back over to you, Chair Anderson.
Okay, thank you. We will close public comment for item 3 and go to questions from the board. Vice Chair Whalen, would you like to begin?
Sure, I have a couple. Will the ADU units that you say were permitted and pulled, they remain in the previously proposed design?
Yeah, they remain
They
as
are
part
not
of
changing in character at all?
the exterior materials are up for changing to meet the 5 new units, yes.
So the answer is yes,
those
they've
are-
changed, or no, they haven't changed?
They will change.
They will change.
But yeah, we're not
To be
required
compatible
to-
with the proposed that we see today. Thank you.
Correct.
And here's the big question for you. How has the design changed to reflect that distinctive Santa Barbara character? You've talked about neighborhood compatibility. What I didn't hear, and what was in the minutes, was design that reflects those elements of the Santa Barbara character. I believe the letter from Sheila Lodge pointed out some examples that do that, but if you could respond.
Sure. I mean, like we said, we did look hard around the neighborhood and found a couple of close to historic, nothing historic, of course, but the ones that were listed as historic adjacent were one of the bungalow, flat top bungalow. It's probably a block or 2 away from that, that are flat roofs. The building next door is a flat roof. There certainly are numerous buildings up and down Castillo itself that are flat roofs. And so we felt the change to a much more simplistic overall design answers to that about the surrounding neighborhoods. I mean, these are not houses that have been built in the last decade. These are old, for the most part, buildings that have been there forever. And as we now know, fireproofing structures is something that's very important, and so we gave up with the rain screen assembly altogether, which is altogether a more energy efficient and fire safe technique, but we recognize that this needs to fit more within the neighborhood. And if you go not too far from our property, you'll see board and batten siding a lot and smooth trowel stucco. And those are the things that we tried to do. I think with the massing of the street elevation, you can see the big comments before were this one large rectangle with the hip roof on it with modern angular cuts, subtractions taken away. And we've completely transformed to simple, albeit flat roofs, but 3 different levels of flat roofs in a much more simplified massing. And to us, that is much more in tune with the neighborhood. These are the kinds of buildings you see, albeit slightly modern representation of those. Because, you know, we are in 2025 building buildings that we want to last.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Vice Chair 6, or Board Member 6?
I'm just trying to frame my question. In regards to the large, the reason that you could not change and get more landscaping down in the center courtyard was because and we talked about this before, having permitted the Unit D and whatever, but yet, and so you said those couldn't change because the permit was pulled, but you're saying that you are going to change those to upgrade to the new style. It seems two separate. Either you can change those or not.
I would love to address that. So if we go to the survey site plan, this property unfortunately is penalized for having 2 front yards, even though when you look at the survey, one of the first.
Let me rephrase it. Is there a way that you can change, and we talked about the risk of this, but can you change the layout of the permitted, previously permitted units to afford more landscaping in the central court?
So could the 2 ADUs be made smaller? Sure. But that means a re-permitting of those 2 units, right? So that's not, doesn't seem like a...
That's the risk that we talked about before, correct?
Perhaps, but if you just hear me out on the front yard. So we are penalized. As you can see, our property line juts quite far away from Arriaga. We would not be allowed by the city to have a driveway off of Arriaga for obvious reasons. There's a bus stop there. It would have to go through further city or county property to get to our site. So in all instances, that's not a true front yard. So if that weren't a front yard, we would get all of that open yard and we wouldn't even be talking about this. But to penalize this property owner double for a corner lot, which is not really a corner lot, when all we're asking for is a slight bending of the rules for open yard, which the ABR is perfectly capable of doing.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about rearranging those previously permitted, not built yet, units so the central court can have more landscaping in it. But
So a permitted project, you would be in favor of changing that permitted project to change for the open yard instead of asking for some other?
Well, I don't know what the ramifications are, but
Well, it's a new permit.
It's disappointing.
Right? It's a new permit, right?
It's disappointing that it went the way it was. I won't say anything further.
Chair Anderson and Board Member 6, I would just like to clarify that the building permits have not yet been pulled. They're ready to issue, but they have not yet been pulled. I would just like to clarify that terminology.
I think the concern is that there's a lot of pavement, and we were just looking for more green space within the middle of the pavement, and so that was, our attempt was, can the ADUs be rearranged to allow that to happen?
And I can answer that too. In the grading permit that establishes the driveway that is per current code, we had a much bigger, the circular bit at the end with the tree in the middle, we had that much greater. It did not meet the ability for one move to turn out, and transportation would not have it. So unfortunately, that is the minimum requirement, and we had to do some finagling to get that to work. So.
And that has to do more with the existing two-story building, correct?
Exactly.
Than the new units?
Exactly.
In the
Yep.
far corner?
Because we kept our
Thank
parking
you.
space under Unit F close away from the existing building.
Okay, thank you.
To try to do that.
Board Member Black, questions?
I guess what came to mind was you made reference to the number of other buildings in the neighborhood that gave you some inspiration for what you're proposing here. Do you have any photographs of these buildings?
We do. Can we go to Google Earth?
I believe there were some included in your plan set, or I could, was it for the neighborhood or the?
Neighborhood.
Oh, yes, I can pull up the Google Earth.
I didn't, okay.
Right. Do we have the ability to go to Google Earth?
Yes, one moment.
So the building that you can just see in the lower center photograph to the right of us is a 3-story box. So, yeah.
That's right next door, yes?
Exactly.
Okay,
And
that one
if
I'm
you-
familiar with.
Right.
But the other ones you spoke of, I'm not.
Correct. So if you go, just turn around to look at the other side of the street, you'll see our board and batten siding. it's one house to the left here. And then I'll take you to, there's the board and batten. So if you go to what's south of Arriaga, one block, if you go to that street and look at the bungalow development. So one past Arriaga is that Sola?
See.
If you go to the, nope, yeah, go east there.
Down this way.
Yes. It's on the left, keep going.
No, this is Mitchell-Terena.
It might be Mitchell-Terena. We can look at it on the overhead view. It's almost to the next block. We can go to overhead view, and I'll show you there's a, yeah, turn on the photographic. Mitchell-Terena Street, see at the right, almost at De La Vina and Mitchell-Terena. Those 4 boxes, 8 boxes with the pink, yep, that one. That is almost a historic, as close as we can get in this area. To the left, there. So there's 2 of them back to back. So that was part of the inspiration for going with flat roofs and keeping everything simple. It also, of course, lowers the height. Our hipped roofs were added another 4 feet to the overall structures. We only maintain the 1 bedroom with the higher ceiling. Everything else is 9 or 8 foot plates. So we reduced the mass considerably. And again, this was the inspiration. And of course, we see this either next door or the one, if you go down Castillo and the next street up from Arriaga, there's the big red flat roof building. Yeah, right, Valerio and Castillo Street. Right there. Spin, there you go. There's another flat roof. And that's right on our block as well. So again, we're trying to blend neighborhood styles and reduce the massing, which we did here as a problem. That overall rectangle with the carved away pieces was not welcome, so we tried to get it as small and low as possible.
Thank you.
Board Member Noon?
I'd just like to direct your response then to fenestration. Where do you tie the fenestration that you've selected for the neighborhood?
We don't see any breakups in the fenestration. They're simple openings. They would be aluminum clad wood windows and doors to maximize translucency and daylight on the inside. You'll see their entry doors are glass, white laminated, to maximize the amount of natural daylight in these units.
I'm talking in relation to the neighborhood. How did the fenestration incompatibility to the neighborhood?
I mean, I see plenty of buildings that have clear openings without breakups, if that's what you mean.
In layout.
You could play with some sizing.
I'm talking layout. There's a window here, a window there. There's not, I don't see the compatibility to. You're making a comparison to other masses, but I don't see a comparison in fenestration.
Yeah, I would say that the older nature of the buildings in the neighborhood didn't really have much glazing concern. It was more a function of putting at least 1 window in every room. We are definitely above and beyond that. You can see our desire to group windows, both vertically and horizontally, wherever we can. But of course, windows and glazing are there to maximize the interior of the units, while also, recognizing some odes to exterior. And yeah, I would say anything built nowadays is not going to look exactly like a lot of the older structures found in this neighborhood. by nature.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Board Member Soffren?
Yeah, I'm just, I know we've asked you, but I'm just trying, if you can help me out, I'm just going through in our guidelines, the architectural design guidelines, section 1.1.2, number B says, I think you've suggested, but correct me if I'm wrong, that, there's really not continuity of architecture in the neighborhood, so that justifies being able to do this, because there's a bit of a mix, right? Not a distinct character.
Well, I mean, it's hard to stand up here and say that the old wood double sash windows are like what windows are now today, but that's essentially what we're up against. We're up against melding highly efficient glazed openings in a new way that also nods to some previous structures which are terribly inefficient and not up to current standards. I mean, that's the difficulty in architecture and always needing to match something that was built 50, 75 years ago, I think. And so I think that, giving a scale and the appearance and the materiality with contemporary windows, because who wouldn't put contemporary windows in these buildings, is a respectable solution.
Yeah, I wasn't asking about windows. I mean, we're talking about the structure as a whole. I guess that's where I was coming from. So, I just want to see clarification. I think, am I right that you were saying that the neighborhood doesn't have a distinctive architectural quality?
I think it's eclectic at best, yes. I would say there's not a set style in the neighborhood.
So, guideline B here, areas without distinctive architecture, because that's what I'll take your statement as. Is in areas which do not possess examples of distinctive architecture, structures and additions should be designed to lead the area towards designs which are harmonious with Santa Barbara's distinctive built environment. And so I'd like to know how your project as proposed leads towards the designs which are harmonious with Santa Barbara's distinctive built environment, because I'm just not seeing that.
Is it the materiality you're not seeing? Because board and batten is as old as you and I are. Smooth troweled stucco, materiality, it's exactly what's found throughout the neighborhood. So if it's the style of the overall massing, which the board didn't have a problem with originally.
That's different, isn't it? Style and massing? You're mixing the two?
No, I think here massing becomes a part of the style, and people's understanding of what style is what it looks like. And what it looks like is oftentimes the overall massing of the structure, not just the finished materials. If it's just the finished materials, then that's pretty easy. But again, we're not trying to duplicate buildings from so far ago. We are trying to fit in with contemporary building techniques and contemporary building products in a way that is 2025. So I see a large difference between this design over the last design, and massing, materiality, everything. And I'm not sure exactly what you're getting at.
I'm just trying to get the fact that, asking if you really believe and if you could identify how this is harmonious with Santa Barbara's distinctive built environment.
Materiality-wise, it's very clear. We picked materials that are exactly found in the neighborhood. So yes, the board and batten is a metal skin rather than a wood skin, but I don't think anyone would ding us for that in 2025. Materiality-wise, absolutely. Form and massing-wise, I think we've looked around the neighborhood and seen there is precedence for simple bungalow, two-story, flat roof, small parapet designs that are well within the eclectic neighborhood that this project lives. And so I guess regardless of what the words are in that manual, I guess I would ask you exactly what it is that you find not in that vein.
I'll tell you that when we get to comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Board Member Anderson.
Is this a painted metal?
It would be a painted finish metal, yes, because the
Okay.
durability factor is, yeah.
What drove the contrasts that you kind of, in the prior scheme, it seemed like the way you had rendered it, there was more a sense of it being a monolithic mass, and here it's kind of like, you've got a very dark thing and a very light thing.
So in this rendering on the bottom, you'll see the two board and batten cubes at the front. Not that same shot, the same one you're on. It's hard when you're rendering and matching a natural material. If you look at the third mass, that's more of what the metal looks like because it's catching sun. The other two are in shadow, and so it's hard to get all of that to look the same. So there is some change because I think when you're doing these and you're trying to break up the massing, having monochrome colors next to monochrome colors don't work. But I think if you look at the building that's just above the car there, that's more in line with what it will be. It's a metallic looking color. It's not a flat painted color. It's a powder coat that has some metallic quality to it. And again, we're trying to dial in the ode to white stucco without being white, and a slightly complementary, albeit differentiating metal skin.
Yeah.
And we can change the color of the metal skin or the stucco.
So, you use the term board and batten. Is it I've never seen a metal board and batten, but is it a standing seam, or is it you're like wrapping a 2-by or something?
No, it looks exactly like a board and batten. It's a clip that is a chunky clip that's 2-by 3/4 inch. Yeah, it's made exactly for that purpose.
Okay. And for the windows, the openings, a lot of the kind of orientations, what kind of drove some of the, this is a good one to look at, the elevation, the placement of some of those, why there's a kind of long horizontal for the landscape, and then there's a portrait window.
So the long horizontals are clear story windows, one in the second floor hallway and the other in the uprise of the stairs. So those are letting in great north light, no direct sun, great north light throughout the units on both levels. So that's the technique there. We certainly are, if you see the drawing 5 there, we're regrouping 2 windows. One is a bedroom above, one is a kitchen below. So we are mindfully trying to not haphazardly put windows around the facades, but group them in a way that, again, has some kind of thought process behind it.
Mm-hmm. And then, how does the building meet the ground there? It looks like you've got on elevation 3 a concrete pad, or I'm not sure, where there's wood.
Yeah, number 3, that is the outdoor area for that unit, and that would need to be some kind of stem wall, retaining wall that could retain earth and have a hardscape for that unit there. Yes, there will be places. I mean, we've got a 10-foot drop from street to lower driveway height that we have to deal with, yes.
Mm-hmm. And then
that's all plantable.
It looks like you've got a glass rail and a wood fencing. Is that?
That's a steel rail there, the stairway to get up into that unit. Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't want to do glass.
I thought I saw on one of those you had glass.
Previously, we did have glass, but we took that away.
Yeah, if you pan up.
Yeah, there's no intention for exterior glass railings. There was in the previous design, though.
Okay, I thought I had too. And then, is there access to Mission Creek from this property?
Technically, or?
Well, it abuts.
There's a fence there now. Okay. And the neighbor has a gate to it. Our fence currently doesn't, I don't believe, so.
Which one of these is the Mission Creek or freeway elevation? That would be the, I guess, plan
Mission
north
Creek
or
is
the
straight
west
up.
elevation.
Yeah.
Do you have, let's see that one.
The view from Mission Creek to the units?
Or yeah, there you go. There's the glass. I knew I saw it in there. So I was,
Where are we?
if you look on the lower elevation on the page, is that,
That blue part?
yeah.
That's just seeing through the carport. So that's an open air carport. You're seeing sky beyond. You wouldn't
Oh,
see
I
sky,
see.
you'd see the other building
You're looking
beyond.
through the,
Yeah, there's no glass on the exterior.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's an open air carport.
And one more question. I know I can read the keynote, but what is the in between the windows? Is that an aluminum panel or?
It's a metal accent panel that would help accentuate the vertical joining of those two windows, yes.
Okay.
And color to be determined.
Okay. Thanks.
Was there any consideration in doing actual wood board and bat?
Yeah, the last time we were here, we had vertical siding, and that didn't go well. We looked at board and batten, but as most of us know, board and batten is made up of plywood, which was, stopped being used as siding a couple decades ago, and so we didn't feel comfortable putting raw plywood with a paint finish on the exterior and doing board and battens to cover up the seams. We felt like a much more stable, safer exterior material was in the offing here, and we chose a metal that is, again, it's made to look exactly like board and batten. It's same spacing, same rib size, same everything, and of course low maintenance is a thing with multi-family construction, so
And then
fire safety.
so with board and bat, they usually have like a trim around fenestration. What is your thoughts on your door jambs, your window jambs and heads, and how is that going to be treated?
Yeah, in the metal, it's more of a flashing and a drip edge, so that's the way they do it with the systems. That would be more what we thought. If you look at the top, the parapets, we have an enlarged turn down to give it that finished trim look at the top.
Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned you're using, or can you just remind me what type of doors and windows? You said wood.
It would be an aluminum-clad wood
Aluminum
system.
clad, okay,
Yeah,
missed that.
they're pretty effective,
Yeah.
energy efficient, and cost-effective, yeah.
And in some of the renderings, the window frames appear anodized?
That would be our go-to, is to do anodized aluminum. Anodized aluminum tends to be very reflective, so you get a lot of the sky reflecting in them wherever you are. If there are trees in the foreground, you'll get a little bit of green bouncing off them, so we like the clear anodized look. But we would be open to looking at that if it wanted to match the board and batten more.
Okay.
Again, final colors are not something we'd like to hold up our progress.
Sure. And then can you go back to the Arriaga? I think it's, page 15. Oh, no, you're rendering, sorry. Yeah. So you talk about the boxy massing, and I'm curious, the language between what is plaster and then what's board and bat, and then if those are two separate masses or three separate massing, why does the board and bat then wrap down below it? If it's
We wanted the board and bat not to float completely off the ground. We felt like that was something that wasn't really prevalent in the neighborhood. Board and batten is usually terminates at the ground, so we wanted to take that one mass and take it all the way to the ground. Now you've got the front door and the offset of the two interlocking pieces. We find that to be a helpful play of those two finishes rather than just everything going straight to the ground and colliding with the ground.
okay. Any follow-up questions?
Yes, Chair Anderson, I have a small question. Could you go to your image number 12? It's that, you call it the east elevation. I just wanted to be clear that the lower one there, would that be what we're seeing from Arriaga?
Are we on the right page for you? Sorry.
Yes. I'm at the bus stop, and
Correct.
I'm looking, that's what I would see.
If you look through all the bushes and shrubbery
All the
and
bushes
the
and,
distance
yeah,
between the
okay,
two, you
thank
would
you.
see
That's
that.
my own,
With
oh.
no plantings on our property.
Another small question, and this may be too far down the line, but do you anticipate there being a communal post office box, or does each residence have their own postal drop?
Typically, they will ask us for a post office box.
And this relates to my open area, back to the open area, because if the, depends on where that post box is.
If you zoom into the front walkway there, I would say it's in the front yard. There is a portion that would be outside of the front yard setback, against the existing building to the right. So if you can see right at the end of that 15-foot,
All right.
we could put our
So it wouldn't
mailbox right there.
compromise the open yard areas.
We're not counting that at
Thank
all
you.
anyway, yes.
I just have one more question. In your context analysis, were there other clear story windows in the neighborhood?
Hard to say. The red stucco could be a clear story condition. I'm not sure, no, I don't, without being privy to the floor plans of those existing buildings, I wouldn't know.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, let's move to comments. Who would like to start?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I guess last September 3rd, I didn't make myself clear enough when I said that the project was radically not was incompatible, and there was no hint of compatibility whatsoever. Those still stand very strong and relevant to the current design. So I really don't need to say anything other, but I want to help this applicant because I don't think you are hearing what our concerns are. Behind, if we unwrap the incompatible material expressions of the metal siding and the incompatible fenestration, behind that is a massing of simple boxes that if all of it was plaster, it begins to look somewhat like the very helpful images that Ms. Lodge included in her public comment. But it has a lot more to do than just taking the metal off. It has to do with proportions of windows, the handling of the masses, the handling of the parapets. Even your flat roof examples had hints of less contemporary expression with little rises at the corners of the parapets. Some of the parapets had modulations. This just is not working. If one is going to, in a more traditional language, when you have second stories overhanging lower stories, there's usually a expression of corbels to, that is more traditional. To argue that you can't do a building with a traditional sense because the techniques and materials are so outdated it doesn't make any sense to me there. You can do a perfectly more traditional building with very up-to-date techniques and methods. It's just not there, and it's not close, and you've got to take a radically different look at this. I think that one of the examples, a lot of the examples that Sheila Lodge provides, which this basic massing comes close to, has a lot of ins and outs and separate massings, a lot of setbacks. I don't know how you're going to achieve that here, especially on the on-ramp elevation, where I think there's 4 boxes that are all in a flat row, but I'll let you deal with that. But I don't think you're listening to what we're saying or what I am saying, and this is just not compatible with a neighborhood and does not reflect the better traditions of Santa Barbara at all.
Sure, thank you, Chair Anderson. I think Mr. Six has rather astutely pointed out that some parts of the massing do seem to work, that is the roof character, but other parts of the massing, the overhang, the blockiness, seem more European modernist and less about Santa Barbara. If I were driving north on 101 and took the Arriaga exit, and this were the first building I saw, I wouldn't know I was in Santa Barbara. It seems to me that this building could be anywhere, and there's very little about it that speaks of the place that we keep trying to underline here, this sense of our history. And you've pointed out the few materials, but even those materials you point out, you kind of twist them in a way that moves farther away from what I believe this committee is looking for, a strong image of Santa Barbara in that tradition and history. The dark palette of colors is clearly out of character with not only the neighborhood, but that expression of Santa Barbara architecture. The metal siding, I would say that's 2. The rectilinear windows, again, are out of character with this Santa Barbara historic style. Now, it seems that you've been a little too selective about things that you've found in the neighborhood that support and defend your design, but I would take another look at those examples that we saw on Mitchell, Terrena, and Valerio, which were simple volumes that were rendered in plaster, smooth plaster, blocky, that again speak of the character of Santa Barbara. And I question your proposal to bring the design into the modern era of 2025. You know, we're a set piece here. We're an imaginary city that never really existed. And this building, I think, speaks too heavily of a fleeting moment of today. And that isn't what Santa Barbara is all about. So I would encourage you to re-examine your design and make it more of a set piece of the city. Thank you.
Board Member Black.
I have nothing. I have nothing to say except that I agree with the comments that have been made.
Board Member Noon.
Similar feelings, just a simple change, to start with in material and fenestration, I think would help. And again, with what the other board members have said.
Board Member Sofrin.
Yeah, I agree with the previous board members, and I also want to echo what Commissioner Six said, sort of about how we want to help you get through this and figure out a solution. And I just think that from that, the questions I was asking was, sort of like, how does this tie in, and, how does it work? We have these guidelines here that we didn't write, that we're governed by, and I'd like to suggest maybe trying to spend a little more time reading through the guidelines that everybody else has to read through and understand maybe a different technique or approach to incorporating some of these materials in the way that they are applied to the project. But as I see it, I don't think it's compatible at all with the neighborhood or Santa Barbara. And I think, that one batten board example of a house, doesn't, create a carte blanche for how that this is being applied. I'll stop there because I think enough's been said.
Board Member Anderson?
Yeah, I think that the massing and the site plan is good, and the way it kind of steps down the hillside, I like that, and it kind of fits into its site nicely. Just looking at the renderings, I think there is a kind of a lack of subtlety a little bit in how and I think the way the metal is rendered right now is a little deceptive. How dark the metal appears, it feels like it's lost a little bit of the kind of earthiness that the prior project had, and I think that was a little bit more successful in kind of grounding these volumes in their site. Just looking at also the materiality shown in this rendering with the wood fencing and the use of the metal guardrails, I think that the material palette itself could be refined and simplified still, and I think that the actual expression of the visual language through the fenestration could also be a little bit more simplified. I like that it's very functional. There's a kind of spirit of pragmatism in how a lot of these windows just kind of appear as a result of their interior environment. And I also think that, in terms of ideas about style or notions of traditionalism or what Santa Barbara might be to some, that the project could also be a kind of blend of a more traditional approach and a more modern approach. There's an architect I really like, a Swiss architect, Rudolf Olgiati, who has a nice language that he developed, which blends these kinds of traditional Swiss chalets with white cube Corbusier architecture. And I could see this project potentially kind of working with a language like that, a more hybrid language, where even some of the forms might have sloped roofs and some of them have flat roofs, so that there's a sense in which this is at once, a white plaster Santa Barbara style, mission style building or whatever, and it's also, of the moment too. And I think that the white plaster does a nice job at rendering light on the facade and, potentially setting some of these windows back to give it more shadow could kind of give the masses a little bit more weight to them. I think that the metal with the mass is a little bit like, it's kind of like, when I think of metal, I think of light things, because steel can have a nice strength to weight ratio. So when you clad it in metal, it kind of departs a little from the kind of heaviness of it. So I think those are my first impressions, comments. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it still meets the mask, bulk, and scale of the location in the neighborhood. It still fits within that. I think that the metal siding is definitely, I I think, giving the wrong impression to not just the board, but to the public. And part of it could be that it's a dark charcoal. Kind of gives the modern Los Angeles vibe that Santa Barbara's not trying to be. So I think a lot of the board members have said some really good options to look at, specifically proportions of fenestrations to the mass and maybe treating the different masses like you have, but in a more Santa Barbara friendly way.
Chair Anderson, can I
Yes.
get the board to expound on the materiality a bit? If we just said that that was board and batten, would we be having this conversation so explicitly over whether it's metal or not? And if not, what are the materials that the board recommends are conducive to the neighborhood or reflective of the neighborhood, if not these two?
Sure. Well, I'll speak for myself first, and then board members can jump in. I'm not opposed to board and bat. I think it's the metal that's it's a put off, especially when you're treating board and bat with trim and like the detailing. And so if you went to traditional board and bat, it doesn't have to be the plywood and the wood. You could look at hardy or maybe something more sustainable, or maybe look at it as a rain screen. I think there are options. So I think I would entertain that, and I think the plaster is a good move, or maybe inverting those, I'm not sure. But I think those, in my opinion, I think I could find compatibility with the neighborhood. So someone else from the board can speak.
Chair Anderson, I think that the way as I said, the way the massing has the potential of meeting some of the themes of Santa Barbara. I think this has to be mostly a plaster mass-based architecture with deeply recessed windows, and if there's any change in material, it would be very minor insets and very carefully limited use that was surrounded by plaster, and not have the board and bat completely occupy and express total large mass blocks.
Question, is that your feeling because there are 5 units that they're proposing? Or because would it be the same if you were looking at just like 2 units like this on the street? Or would you feel the same way?
Yes, I feel the same.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'd like to add to the material palette. There's Mission Creek right behind the property, and there's stones in Mission Creek tells a story about Santa Barbara, and there's material that is native to this place that could also be expressed in the actual facade of the building. That would, not get so much into questions of style, but it would, instead of rooting the project in questions of vernacular style, could root it in the site itself.
Well, I would offer that has been remiss in this whole conversation. I don't think we're getting very much talk about the breaking down of the masses, the fact that this building could be one big building of 5 units, but we chose to render it the way we did in 3 separate buildings. So, look, as a service to the owner, is there a way where this whole project turns to stucco and it's acceptable by enough of the members here at this table to move him forward? Are there enough voters here to say board and batten needs to be wood board and batten? We don't appreciate nobody does, you guys don't either, us having to come back 3 times for a conceptual review. I mean, the differences between the original design and this design are quite substantial, without completely penalizing the units and the density and the amount of, rentable apartments that will be available on this site. And so any plea I would ask that would get us to a, concept level, even if you were to direct finishes.
So go ahead. I was gonna ask that we discuss this on the board, so maybe we could get a raise of hands, because I think we should include it in our motion, a very clear direction, so that they can come back for preliminary design if they get their complete letter. So I guess from a show of hands, if they changed all the forms to plaster, if the whole thing is plaster, would you allow them to come back for a PDA? I guess, can you raise your hand?
And that would be in the spirit of, Irving Gill, which I've made the case for several times and not been successful. But I would welcome a reference to Irving Gill.
Okay, so can you raise your hands if you changed it all to plaster, that they could come back for PDA? No? What? Okay, so
Can I say something?
yeah.
I just, when I've presented to other boards on your side, I've been told by other boards that we are also not here to be the designer, and I have been directed to go back, study the neighborhood, study the guidelines, and come back, and that's the process that's established that we have not created, that's existing. So I think I don't know how much more, because I think we're starting to go around in circles at this point. The project clearly, by nobody raising their hands, feels that the project is at a stage where it can move forward. I'll speak for myself and say, I don't think you're interested in being compatible with the neighborhood. I think that you are trying to design something that I do agree. I look at this and I think of Echo Park in Los Angeles. And so I think you have come forward tremendously from the first time you were here, but I still think there's a ways to go. And I think that involves really doing a serious context analysis and accepting the fact that you want to develop a property in Santa Barbara that has guidelines that we did not create, that are in place, that are here to protect and preserve the integrity of this community.
I can appreciate that, and any comments that would compare the previous to this one would be much appreciated.
Great. Who would like to make a motion for indefinite continuance back to the full board?
I'll make a motion for indefinite continuance to the full board, with the feedback that we do not believe that the project still is compatible with the community. There is not a pushback so much, I believe, on the massing of the project. We think that there has been a lot of great improvement from the first time this project was presented to the board. We think that, yes, stucco is appropriate. Yes, the batten board and some sort of application can be appropriate. And we also feel that the fenestration needs to be reviewed and considered, because the fenestration is definitely not compatible with the neighborhood. Is there anything else? Okay, that's the motion.
I'll second. Any discussion?
Could we have the secretary read that back, please, Joni?
One, that the board does not believe that the project is compatible with the community. that the massing is not in question. There has been great improvement in that area. The stucco and batten board are appropriate in ways that they can be applied, and that the fenestration is not compatible with the neighborhood.
Thank you.
I would just clarify that the stucco and batten board can be appropriate materials, but we should reconsider how they are applied. They do not seem appropriate the way they are being applied.
May I add that the materials, when used, should reflect a mass-based Santa Barbara architecture.
Yes.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, let's take a vote.
Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
No.
Board Member Black,
Yes.
Board Member Noon,
Yes.
Board Member Six,
Yes.
Board Member Sovereign,
Yes.
motion passes.
Board Member Anderson, would you like to state why you said no?
Well, I didn't really feel like the summary reflected a lot of the comments I made, so that's why I voted no.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on. Okay, 2-minute break, please. Not back. Open, and we'll move to item number 4, continue item for project design approval to South Quarantina Street. Proposal for a new 2-story, 18,575 square foot corporate office building for Marburg Industries. The project includes 100 vehicle parking spaces accessed off South Quarantina Street, bicycle parking, a trash enclosure, and hardscape and landscape improvements throughout the site. Planning Commission approval of a CDP and development plan to allow the construction of a net new non-residential floor area was granted on February 13th, 2025. Project design approval is requested. It requires compliance with Planning Commission Resolution Number 001-25 and compliance with project compatibility findings and urban design guidelines. Project was last reviewed on June 10th, 2024 for concept. All right, welcome back. Anything from staff?
Yes, if you'd like to review the previous minutes from the June 10th hearing, I can pull those up. I believe there were a few comments. And then just that it's here for PDA, so in your motion you would need to include the project compatibility findings. But from the last hearing, the motion was continue indefinitely to the Planning Commission with comments. 1, the board finds the architecture and site planning acceptable and the materials and design admirable. 2, study the planting materials for perimeter fencing. 3, provide a plan for sun protection for the sun-exposed glazing. 4, avoid a significant height increase of the screen wall for the equipment well. 5, the board finds story poles are not required as the building property size, mass, bulk, and scale are consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. And 6, that the compatibility analysis criteria generally have been met. Which those, I think those were just preliminarily made, but those need to be formally made today. And that's all. Thank you.
I have a conflict, Board Member Anderson, or Chair Anderson, sorry.
It's
So
okay.
I'll step down.
All right, see ya. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. You have
Thank
15
you.
minutes to talk us through any changes and updates and address the previous comments.
Okay. Brian Cornell.
Matthew Chua. Ricardo Castellanos.
Okay. The project is substantially as you saw it. There have been a few minor changes, I think some improvements. I will say the Planning Commission loved the project. They were very pleased. As far as the site plan is concerned, we've separated out, we have a bike parking area. Maybe you can point for me. We have a public bike parking area, and then we have an employee bike parking area. And we've also, from a site plan standpoint, Ricardo, we haven't really changed any landscaping at this point, correct? So I think let's go to the renderings, Matthew, and it's going to be the best explanation for what we have done. So we have the project as you saw it last on the left, and how it is today on the right. So we have added some more plaster walls just to mitigate the glazing and deal with some structural issues. From the corner, you can see it's very much the same. We've slightly reduced those glass elements, which I think helps the building actually enormously. We still have the stone plinth all the way around it. And next views, we've added, I don't know if I guess it doesn't show on this view, that roof element. So this is on the,
This is the street.
yeah, this is on the street side. So here we've added that roof element, which is sort of picking up the same concept of that CLT panel that is over the main entry element. So the windows will all be bronze anodized aluminum. Again, the CLT is playing a major component in the design of the building. The copper gutters surrounding it with half-round gutters with round downspouts. What have I missed? So I think happy to answer questions.
Do you want to address any of the comments
From-
the meeting, from the last meeting, maybe about perimeter fencing, planting? Was there any updates to that?
Maybe we could go to the landscape plan. We do have a fence all the way around as is illustrated in those renderings.
So regarding the perimeter fencing, as was suggested, that we would probably put the vines on the inside of the wall, on the parking lot side, as opposed to the street side. We do like the bougainvillea because it gives it that Santa Barbara feel. And although we are still looking at other options, but that's kind of what we're still kind of going with. And it also will provide that color that we're looking for.
I can address also, there is a comment about solar control. And so while we didn't do anything specifically on the exterior in terms of enlarging overhangs or anything, we have discussed, if you can see in this view, the way our structure runs at the exterior. We have these beams that run parallel with like the exterior facade. And the plan is to provide kind of like shade controls in that interstitial space between the structure and the exterior wall. So while we haven't really done anything in terms of the exterior, that's kind of what we've discussed.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to have to be sun control that's controlled on the inside. And then we are pulling the distance from that window wall to that glue lamp is going to be increased. I think how much?
So we're increasing it around like 6 inches.
6 inches.
Yeah. Basically, we're in the process of coordinating kind of like how much space we need for those controls.
Okay, thank you. We will open up public comment.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I will start with in-person public comment. At this time, I do not have any slips for this particular project. However, if anyone wishes to fill one out and make a comment, they may bring one to me. I see no one in the audience moving to do so, so we will turn our attention to virtual comment. And at this time, I do not have any hands raised for virtual comment, and we did not receive any written correspondence for this project. So at that, I will turn it back over to you, Chair Anderson.
Okay, thanks. We will close public comment for item 4 and go to questions from the board. Board Member Black, would you like to start?
This is a minor thing, but what is the material in the eave? And then I notice it's on the ceiling too.
It is all Douglas fir. It's a CLT panel that'll be about 8 inches thick. So the ceiling and the overhang are all that integrated material.
Other questions?
Board Member Sofrin?
No questions.
Board Member Anderson?
What drove some of the panelization of the facade? Because I see in the prior page that in the rendered elevations, one of the corners is glass and then the other corner is solid plaster wall. Is it functional?
Yeah, I mean, we basically, it's been a combination of looking at structural shear wall requirements and also just the function inside the building. And in some cases, we didn't want to have as much glass. And so I think that really is what drove it, right?
Yeah, just as the projects, we further developed the project, just coordinating the programmatic spaces on the interior. And obviously, like some spaces you want less light, and some it's okay to have more exposed glazing. So just a combination of studying that and also what Brian was saying, some of the structural considerations.
So these are shear walls? Or some of them are at least?
Some of them are,
Okay,
yes.
I see. And in this view, we can see the gluon penetrating the exterior envelope. And is that the only case that happens in, or in the lower level I can see too, but?
You're talking about this right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So previously, you could see we had a post here.
Mhm.
And when we were talking with our structural consultant, our structural engineer, basically, he was saying this was an option. So it was something we considered and decided to go with for a cleaner look.
Is that a balcony there then, that they have access to on the second level?
No, it's
Oh.
just an overhang at
Okay.
the entry.
I see. Okay, that's all my questions for the moment.
Board Member 6?
Yes, there was also a comment from previous on concern about the screen wall for the mechanical at the center. of the building have you, because the concern was because this is viewed from the freeway at a certain height, we're going to see, I think, a lot of roofscape. Have you dialed in on your clearances and heights of sound walls and your hopefully simplicity of the solar array?
Yeah, we are trying to keep it to a minimum, that's for sure, and we obviously want to maximize the solar. I will tell you that it's possible, we're still evaluating it, that we may even have some carport elements in that parking lot that would have additional solar panels in order to achieve the net zero. But the direction to our mechanical engineer is to minimize the actual air handling equipment on the roof.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Since we're here for PDA, I'm not quite sure about the protocol, but it would seem customary to have a materials board or illustration. Specifically, my question comes from your renderings. The plaster seems to change color around the building. So the specific question is, what color is the plaster that you have in mind?
White.
like Santa Claus beard white?
Yeah, not white. No, it will be a warm white, and I apologize, why don't we have a materials board?
Well, you'll be back for final.
We will, and we'll come back in progress if you would like.
No,
because,
that would be fine, just to see the material board or illustration at
that
final.
precise color, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Lighting, et cetera.
Okay, I just had one question. Can we just go to the drawn elevations? Can you just remind me, oh yeah, can you zoom into the north elevation at the bottom? Is it a different material between the stone and the windows where it's gray? Is that supposed to be a different plaster color?
Yeah, it's supposed to be plaster. It's not concrete. It is just a slightly different color to, accentuate that base.
Okay, and then is it in the same plane as the vertical white panel, or
No.
are they? Okay,
It's back.
that was what couldn't remember. Okay. Any follow-up questions?
Chair Anderson, before we move into comments, if Board Member Anderson can just confirm that he reviewed the previous video in minutes, so in order to comment and vote.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then let's move into comments. Who would like to start?
Oh, I'll start. Thank you, Chair Anderson. I am so pleased at the progress this project has made. I remember when we started, it was a building on Quinientos that really was nowhere, and every time you've come back, this building has gotten better and better. It's almost a shame to waste it on that neighborhood. I hope that it will inspire that neighborhood to inspire them to greater things. So thank you for a lovely presentation and design.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a gorgeous building. I appreciate the additional massing. Yeah, it's ready for PDA.
Board Member Black?
I would agree.
Board Member Safran?
Yeah, thanks for working with us, and it looks great, guys.
Board Member Anderson?
Just from the first comment, to me, it looks a little kind of flat on the facade, and the way those walls meet the storefront system is, it kind of renders out that entire plane and the scale of that for the pedestrian experience and the height of the building. Seeing those double height walls, it feels a little boxy and kind of lacking the kind of proportioning that might feel a little bit better to a human range scale. And I think the sill height on the lower level windows feels a little high, but otherwise it seems like a straightforward, decent, nice building.
Yes, I agree. I think it's ready for PDA and look forward to the material board and all the details that come associated for the next step.
I'd be willing to make a motion, but first a question to staff. They're asking for compliance with Planning Commission resolution. How do we do that? Or do we just ignore that?
Yes, so that's staff's vetting that the project does comply with the planning commission resolution, and I did speak with the case planner, Pilar Plummer, and she said there's no conditions that need to be
So,
concerned about, so.
I need to mention that in my
If you could
motion?
include it in your motion.
All right, then I'll make a motion that the board finds compliance with Planning Commission Resolution number 001-25 and does meet project compatibility findings and urban design guidelines. It is consistent with those design guidelines, compatible with the architectural character of that neighborhood, even more so. It's appropriate in size, mass, bulk, height, and scale. It's doesn't involve any adjacent landmark or historic resources. It does not block any public views of the ocean nor mountains, and it has an appropriate use of open space and landscaping. Okay.
I'll second. Okay, let's
Okay.
take a vote.
Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Black.
Yes.
Board Member Six,
Yes.
Board Member Sovereign,
Yes.
motion passes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
nice.
There
Thank you
is
so much.
a
Look forward to
10-day
coming back.
appeal period. It's on the screen. All right, and with that, we will adjourn our ABR meeting for March 17th.